My name is Joe Henmuller. I was born in Chicago, Illinois. Lived there all my life. I was born June 15th, 1933. I'm married. We have 7 children. They're all married. We have 17 grandchildren and 4 great-grandchildren, which is very interesting because I'm an only child. But my wife is the youngest of 6. Went to Catholic grade school, Catholic high school, a couple of years of college before I went in the service, and then took a lot of courses afterwards under the GI Bill. Went in the service in June of 1953. Actually, I show on there I was drafted, but what it was, I had met my wife-to-be, Grace, and we've been married for 59 years now. And I had met her, and we knew we were going to get married someday, and I didn't want to sit around, waiting to see when I was going to get drafted. And I didn't believe in getting married and going overseas, especially with the war going on and everything. So I went to the draft board. Actually, my neighborhood buddy and we both went to the draft board and said, put us at the top of the list. And it didn't take much. Within a month, we got our notices and we went in. Went in out of Fort Sheridan, Illinois. Sent me to Fort Chaffee. Now, it was Camp Chaffee, now it's Fort Chaffee, Arkansas. Went through basic training there. And then for some reason they decided that I had mechanical aptitude, so they sent me to Fort Sill, Oklahoma for helicopter maintenance training, which is what I ended up doing. Arrived in Korea in February of '54 and was there until March of '55. Originally stationed up they call the Iron Triangle area, which is actually above the 38th parallel, but right behind the DMZ. And, of course, in '54, they started sending some units home, so the artillery observation outfit I was with went back to the States. So I was then transferred into the 13th Helicopter Company, transportation helicopter, down around Weijiangbu. That's kind of the story in a nutshell. Again, the actual combat was over by then. We had a little bit of problem from time to time especially up north, with the infiltrators. We lived in squad tents and slept on canvas cots with rubber air mattresses and washed up with cold water. And it wasn't Club Med, but it certainly was not, what a lot of these fellows went through during the fighting. So that's kind of the story. So I'll leave it up to you then. You can ask me what else you want to know about.
What were your duties while you were there?
Okay. Well, when I first got over there, was a Field Artillery Observation Battalion. What they did was they had one helicopter, the little Bell with the bubble, the kind that you see in the MASH series, and they would actually do artillery spotting for the artillery. They would locate during the war, of course, they would locate the enemy and call in the coordinates and so on and so forth. So there, my job basically was just to maintain the ship. I would go up with the pilot from time to time on different things, but again, we weren't actually doing artillery spotting. It was just. Then when they went home, I went down to the 13th Helicopter. They were a transportation organization. There were 2 of us for the ship. It was a bigger ship. It's called the H-19 Chickasaw. I should have brought a picture along to show you, but and there my duties basically were to not only maintain the ship, and then I became the more time in grade or whatever, I became the crew chief, and then I had another mechanic with me. We maintained the ship, and then I would go along with the pilot on most of the missions. We would transport people from place to place. We would bring supplies from here to there. We would transport some dignitaries. Probably the things that stand out in my mind, other than the normal day-to-day things, at some point, I forget exactly the time. It was early in '55. One of the Air Force jet pilots strayed over the DMZ into the north and was shot down. And after much negotiation, they agreed to repatriate him. So my ship, we flew into the DMZ and picked him up to bring him back from the north. And the spring of '55, they had a lot of flooding the Han River near Seoul, so we did a lot of evacuation work there, picking up people who were stranded in high ground areas surrounded by water, and brought them back. The only other thing, just an anecdotal thing, our outfit, and it was not my ship, but our outfit, they had a USO tour over there, and Marilyn Monroe happened to be over in Japan on her honeymoon with Joe DiMaggio, of all things, and somebody convinced her to leave for a couple of days and come over to Korea and join the USO tour. Scuttlebutt has it that Joe DiMaggio, her husband, wasn't too happy about her leaving him on their honeymoon and going over to Korea to entertain a bunch of GIs. But one of our ships went over and transported her around, and of course that crew was a big celebrity. Oh, is this where Marilyn Monroe was? She, man, you were sitting in there and talking to her in the cargo compartment, and transportation compartment, this and that. So, but that's basically what we did during the war. During the war, actually, they would be used to insert troops. They would be used to bring out some wounded. In actual troops, you could bring in about 10 or 12 combat-ready troops in one of those choppers. But basically, it was just we were just there and just did this and that, and part of the occupation group over there.
So your main job was to maintain the helicopters? Maintain
the helicopter, and as the crew chief, to fly along and assist the people. And actually, one time we transported General Ridgway, who was the commander over there, the overall commander, and I still remember my commander said, make sure you help him down from the chopper. And I was down there and I looked at him, and here was this guy, with the hand grenades on his thing and the 45, and I just could not bring myself to say, could I give you a hand, sir? Because I thought he'd look at me and say, son, I don't need a hand from anybody, I just tremendously admired him, and of course, as a young 21-year-old kid, I was in awe of this 4-star general, and who had been a big general in World War II and was a real hero as far as I was concerned. So, but day-to-day life, when I was down at the 13th helicopter, we did have Quonset huts, and so it was a little bit better. We still slept on canvas cots with rubber air mattresses, and it was kind of funny. In the summer, actually all year round, but we'd be able to go for a shower maybe once a week. Otherwise, we just wash up, and so it was particularly funny in the summer because 3 or 4 of us would pile into a Jeep, and we go over these dirt roads to a shower point, maybe 10 or 15 miles away, and take a shower and get clean clothes and then get back in this Jeep and go over these dusty dirt roads 10, 15 miles. We probably were dirtier than when we left. It was just a psychological idea that we had a shower, so.
So what kind of things did you see? What did it look like right after the war?
Well, after the war, it was, again, it wasn't much changed. The country was devastated. I was able to get into Seoul a couple of times, and I mean, it was just unchanged because it was only a few months after the ceasefire, and of course, makes it all the more amazing when you see the pictures and see what it's like over there now and what they've accomplished. And, while we certainly did some things to help them out, certainly tremendous amount of the credit goes to them because they're very, very industrious, people, and very hardworking people, very intelligent people. And just a little sidelight anecdote too is it was funny when we were over there. We would pay them to come in to our base and take out the tin cans and everything, the beer and the soda and all this kind of stuff. And they turn around and they take them and they'd strip off the paint and everything, and they'd make cigarette lighters and stuff like that, and then sell us back to back to us. So we paid them to take the stuff away, and then they came back and we paid them again to buy the stuff that they made from the material they had gotten from us. But it was pretty much just a normal situation. I had guard duty and did our thing with the ship, and but again, the country, of course, was devastated. Where we were, it was not, in a big city or anything, and mostly just farm areas. Some of the things that all GIs over there remember are the smell of kimchi, and the smell in the summer of the rice paddies, which they used human excrement for their fertilizer. And you walking along there, especially walking guard duty at night, right along the perimeter fence there next to some farmer's rice paddy, and it was a smell you don't forget. But as I say, I don't have any combat stories to tell like some of these fellas, so it was just about 14, 15 months of just doing my job over there, which was what I was trained to do, and it was, as you look back on it now, there were some hardships, obviously, I still remember when we, one night we finally, the major, the commander called us all together and he said, I want everybody to go to the supply room. We've gotten Army cots instead of the regular Army beds, instead of the canvas cots. So draw them out of there and, blah, blah, set them up. And it was funny because about 8 or 8:30 at night, he came to the Quonset huts, and he came to our hut to see if what we thought about it. He opened the door, and the lights were out. Every last guy was in bed at 8 o'clock at night because they hadn't slept in a bed probably for a year, So it was little things, were nice, that you weren't used to, you've been gotten away from. But I say I look back now, and they were. I remember the good times. Some of the people that I knew, and one of the things in the profile there, you asked me anybody I remember, and that was I put down the only one I remember really is my pilot, and his name was Redline. His nickname was Redline Ryan. And the reason for it, he's a very interesting fellow. He had actually been a Messerschmitt pilot for the Germans during World War II. And he had come over here and been naturalized and went into our Army. Now he's flying helicopters. And if you know anything about aircraft, red line is you don't go above that speed. Otherwise, they don't know what's going to happen to the airplane. Well, that's the only way he knew how to fly, was right up at the red line. And the big helicopters like that, you don't lift them straight off. You run them a little bit to get a little ground speed up to lift it, to not take some of the pressure off the airframe. Well, anyway, we had about a 12-foot fence around their compound where the choppers were. We had about a dozen choppers. And what he would do, he would get that thing cranked up, and he'd run right at that fence, and he'd wait until the very last minute, and then he'd pull back on the stick, and he'd clear the fence by about that much with the wheels of the chopper. So he was called Redline Ryan. And he was kind of fun to fly with, but he was kind of scary at times. The only time it bothered me was the day he was taking me down to Incheon to go home. And I said, Chief, if you kill me now, I said, you know, I'm gonna haunt you for the rest of your natural life. But anyway,
Just following the signing of the armistice, and kind of what was it like? What was the army kind of working on?
well, we were over there, basically at that time. Now the DMZ and everything is occupied by the ROK troops, the Republic of Korea. In those days, as I say, and I don't mean to dramatize it, but it was still considered a war zone until January of '55, and there were a few instances where people would try and infiltrate into the different outfits and try and cause problems. And I don't know if you're aware of it or not, but I think probably between 100 and 150 of our guys have been killed over there even since the armistice or ceasefire was signed. So it was still sort of a semi-combat zone, and it was not exactly like garrison duty because we had our weapons, and still remember when I was over there, especially up north there. When you sleep in the tent there, you'd sleep. Keep your cot as far away from the side of the tent as you could, and sleep with your bayonet because you never knew what they might try and come in and do something. So it was a little bit more than occupation duty, but basically we were as I say, just there to do whatever our job was and make sure that they didn't try and start anything up again. And at that time, of course, we had now we have about, I think, just under 30,000 troops over there. Over that time, we probably had 100,000 or more troops over there throughout the country. And of course, we did some training of the Korean troops to enable them to stand on their own because, they did not have the kind of army they have today. Today, they have an army they're probably able to stand up to almost any other army in the world. But at that time, they didn't. So we were there to kind of backstop them and do whatever was necessary to help them get started on the road to rebuilding their country,
And what did it feel like at that time to be there?
Well, that's it's a funny question. You don't, when you're a young 20, 21-year-old kid, you don't think too much about. First of all, we never thought about, or at least I never thought about, going to Canada to avoid going in or going over to Korea. It just was not in my mindset. We didn't think that way at the time. The government said, we need you for 2 years, So we went over and we did it. And I guess it was kind of an adventure of sorts. I had, 20 years old when I went in. I had, been up to Wisconsin, Michigan, and stuff like that, but, never any place else. Being an only child, I didn't have a whole lot of experience with, a bunch of group of people, and so it was kind of an adventure. But I say you really, I don't know, it's hard to explain, but you really didn't think much about it. You didn't think, I'm doing a wonderful thing, or it's important that I do this. It was just, this was just something that you were told to do, and you went over and you did it. And I guess later on you thought about it a little bit more, and you took a certain amount of pride in the fact that, you had done something for your country, that you had helped this other country, get on the road to, freedom and independence and building a country, the country that they have today. But I say at that time, you really didn't. I don't remember, and maybe I'm just not as introspective as some people might be. One of the guys that I knew over there, he wrote a book, and obviously he took all kinds of notes and everything while he was over there. To me, I didn't. I just was there, and every day I'd write a letter to my fiance, and and every few days write a letter to my folks and just go about doing my job. I say there's no thought about, we're on some great crusade or something. It was just, Uncle Sam says, we need you over here, and they sent you over here. So, okay, here we are. And you didn't worry about, at that age, you didn't worry about, am I going to get killed, or is the helicopter going to crash or something? It was just, okay, we're going up. And, they say now you have second thoughts about things. As you get older, you realize, you're mortal. But at that time, say you just did it, and just almost like having a job. We went out there every day, got on the flight line, got the ship ready to fly. If we had a particular mission, and go along with the pilot, come back. Colder than heck over there, of course. Fortunately, we didn't know anything about wind chill, because it was 25 to 30 degrees below zero in the mountains with a howling wind. I don't have no idea what the wind chill was, but you just did it. And that was, again, it was not like a combat situation. It was a day-to-day survival and things like that. And it's just kind of another job, just a 2-year section of my life where I was doing something different. And then once it was over, went back to civilian life, and that was it.
Did you know much about Korea before you went, or what, before the war started?
I knew absolutely nothing about Korea, like probably most people, As the old saying is, they came to a country they never heard of and the people they never met, Again, President Truman said, we've got to go over there and help these people out, so we went and did it, but I had no idea. I mean, I had taken geography in high school, as we did in those days, which I guess they don't do that anymore. But so I had an idea. Korea was in the Far East, somewhere near Japan. But beyond that, I knew nothing about the country, and of course it was interesting to get over there, and then to go to Japan a couple of times on leave and see what Japan had become in just a short period of time. After the end of the war in 1945, and by 1953, 54, they had built up tremendously, and it was so it was an adventure. But I say, no, I had no idea, what Korea was. And at the time, I was a little upset because my father was born in Austria, and he was 12 years old before he came over here, so I knew a lot about Germany and Austria. And the class, as they say, right before me went to Germany, and here I am, I'm going to Korea. I say, why couldn't I have gone to Germany, where my heritage is, and see all this stuff? And in later years, I thought, well, I'm glad I didn't, because I had the opportunity to go to the Far East, and my wife and I went to Germany and Austria on our own, so I got to see it, anyway. But at the time, it was kind of a bummer, with my background in that. Why couldn't I go to Germany? But say, looking back on it, I'm happy that I did, and it's just nice to be able to associate with a bunch of fellows like I do, who all have a common thing. We all were over there, whether it was during the war or after the war, and since it's only a ceasefire, anybody who's been over in Korea at any time since 1950, they're eligible to join our organization. They're all considered Korean War or Korean service veterans. And in fact, at our thing last year, I had one of our daughters-in-law, her younger brother, did a tour in Korea before he went over to Afghanistan and Iraq. So we had him at the convention, and so as I say, one of the biggest benefits is being able, at this stage in life, have another, besides all the family interest, to have another interest, a bunch of really nice guys and their spouses that we get together with. We have meetings once a month, and we chit-chat and, do things. And we collect money once a year. We call Daisy Days, and then we give the money out to various good organizations. So it's rewarding in that respect. So.
Have you been on any of the revisit tours?
No, I keep talking about it, and almost went a couple of years ago, and then something came up. Excuse me. Unfortunately, my wife, our health is pretty good, but she couldn't deal with that long of a plane ride, and that. But well, our youngest son, particularly, he would be very interested in going with me because they won't let you go by yourself, Bunch of old guys, they think you need somebody to hold their hand, but which I really don't think I do, but they do. So I haven't been there, and I certainly I probably should do it, and of course I've seen all the pictures and it's just amazing, and the fellows have been on like the Bazuskas, the twins, they've been over there, and people I've talked to, they said it's just a wonderful experience. They really treat you royally, and the Korean people, of course, there's no other country that we've ever fought in or for that's been as grateful as the Korean people. And it's 60 years down the road, and they still, they can't do enough for you. So, but no, I haven't been on that. I have been to Washington. Wife and I went a couple of years ago to see the Korean War Memorial along with other things, and that was as the other fellow said here, we may be prejudiced, but I think it's just really, I think it's a wonderful design. There was some criticism of it at the beginning. Some people said this and that, but there's always people who criticize something, But I think it's just a wonderful depiction of what it was like, the way the fellows are dressed, the whole atmosphere is just, I was impressed and humbled by seeing it. So.
What have you done since coming back?
All right, well, before I went in the service, besides going to college, I was teaching accordion. I was an accordionist, and I taught it for about 5 or 6 years, starting when I was about 16 years old. And so I came out of the service in May of 55, and wife and I were married in July of 55. I jokingly tell people I just changed commanding officers 2 months later. So my wife, after I went back to teaching music, and after a couple months of that, my wife didn't appreciate, my being home all day and going to work at 3 in the afternoon and not coming home until 10:30, 11 at night. So she kind of, in a nice way, asked me if I was going to get a real job. So I, local newspaper had an ad for management trainee in banking, and so I went to the local bank, which was about 2 or 3 blocks away, and got a job there in the late 50s, and did that until I retired. I was a banker for almost 40 years, and again, raised a family, just did the normal things. I've been retired now for 15 years, and as I said, we've got a big family, a very close family, and a lot of things going on. So I was very active. I belonged to the VFW, banking organizations, football parents club, all the. My wife always laughs at me. She says, when they ask her, look for volunteers, what do you do? Jump up and down and wave your hand and say, me, me, me. But I'm a believer that, if you belong to something, somebody's got to be active and do things. And, you're either going to be part of the solution or part of the problem, and I try and be part of the solution. I enjoy, and I'm comfortable with, running things and speaking and stuff like that. So I enjoy being involved.
How do you feel like your time in the military, what kind of life lessons did you learn?
Well, I think the first life lesson you learn in the military is you learn that it's not all about me, but it's a group thing. You learn discipline, and I've always said, unfortunately, my sons, we have 7 children, 6 of them are sons, And fortunately, they were, too young for Vietnam and too old for Afghanistan and all this stuff. And of course, I'm happy that they were, because you never want to see your children get into harm's way. But other than that, in a general way, I've always said that I thought that short of a wartime situation, it'd be wonderful for every person, every man and now every woman, to spend a year or two in the military, because you learn discipline. You learn, besides learning a skill, which a lot of them do today, you learn discipline. You learn to follow orders. You learn that there's, you have to be responsible for certain things. You have to, if this is your job, you better get it done. And of course, I had a good start on that, because I had, crowd parents who, during the Depression, and I grew up during the Depression, and I guess I was left with a good work ethic by them, and the military just kind of reinforced that. And so that I think that's the biggest life lesson I learned was, you got a job, do it. It's not just you. There are other people. You're part of a unit. You've got to do your share of it and look out for yourself and look out for the next guy.
And how has your time in Korea and in the military, how has that affected your perception or like your opinion about war and service?
Well, I think service is important. I think war is a shame. We're never going to, we're always going to be fighting somewhere. It's unfortunate. But, someone once said that war is the result of the absolute failure of diplomacy. And that's what it amounts to. People cannot settle their differences at the bargaining table, so they go to war. I think it's a terrible thing. But as far as the military is concerned, it's the fact of life. We have to be able to defend ourselves. We now have the role that the British had, the English had for many, many years. We're kind of the policemen of the world. And, it's kind of a nasty job, but somebody has to do it. But as I say, I think the military in and of itself is good. It's just the way the Israelis do it. Everybody, man, woman, they all have to spend some time, and I think it's good. But even though I wasn't there, I'm an avid reader of history. I never read fiction. I just read, nonfiction, mostly history and that. And somebody said to me recently, one of the fellows didn't realize that I wasn't there to fight. He says, I understand, Korea was really a nasty war. And I said, yeah, but they're all nasty wars. There's no nice wars. And it's just unfortunate, and when you think of all the lives that are lost and everything. But again, I'm happy that I had my military service, because I think it was a good experience, and it was good training, and I think it was something that I look back on now and I say, well, I'm proud to have been in, even though I didn't see any fighting. That's through no fault of my own. If I'd been born a year young sooner, I'd have probably been right in the midst of it. But it is what it is, and I did what I was supposed to do, and I look back on it and I say, okay, to some satisfaction, especially looking back and seeing what's become of that country 60 years later. And we had a part of that in whatever aspect, whether it was during the fighting or thereafter. We were part of helping them become what they are today. So there's a certain amount of satisfaction in that.
Is there anything else that I haven't asked that you want to share?
No, there's really nothing else that I can think of. Say it was an interesting experience, and at the time it was just an experience, and as time went on, of course, all you could think about when you got closer was you became a short timer and started marking off the days because you were anxious to get back and see your family, and of course, in my case, my wife to be, and things like that. Probably the worst experience of the whole thing was the going over and coming back on troop ships and being out there. And, if you've never been on a troop ship, it's a real experience, especially if when the water gets rough and first couple days before you get your sea legs, and you're out in the ocean there, and the ship comes up about 35, 40 feet the bow of the ship, and it slams down in the water, and guys are being ill all over the place. So compared to that, Korea was a picnic. It was going over and coming back that was the worst part of the whole experience. Only last thing I'll share with you, one of the real thrills was when we came back in to Fort Lewis, Washington, and we were coming in the Puget Sound, and all of a sudden these two jet planes flew over and wagged their wings, and we knew we were back in the States, and it was just kind of a thrill. And then we were ready to get off the ship. Well, we get off the ship. They pulled in, and of course there were a lot of people there who lived in the area who had fellows coming back. And so they let those fellows who lived in the area go off the ship first. And I'll never forget, there was one fellow, he started walking down the gangplank, and he had his duffel bag over his shoulder. And he started walking down, and all of a sudden he spotted his wife or fiance or whatever she was, and he broke into a trot. And by the time he got to the bottom of the gangplank, he just threw his duffel bag, and he ran and he grabbed and started hugging her, and about 4,000 guys are standing there and yelling and cheering and whistling and everything. And it was kind of we knew we were back home, and another fellow went down there and got down on his hands and knees and kissed the ground, and I always remembered that. It was kind of interesting.